This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self-Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy.
Let's talk about the all-important subject matter of behavior change, or rather 6 major misconceptions around behavior change that gets in the way of meaningful transformation, and what do we do about it? Because despite the enormous body of information on behavior change, people still find changing unwanted behaviors, whether they be around weight loss, work, or relationships, to be amongst the most frustrating and sometimes elusive struggles in their lives. I mean, any of you ever feel like that? Yeah, me neither. So anyway, the National Institutes of Health reports that 97% of individuals who set a goal for weight loss, that's a common one, are either going to fail to lose the weight or keep it off for a span of 5 years, which is how they measure long-term adherence. And many of the self-help gurus right there on our social media feed, they look at this and their question is, what's wrong with 97% of us? How is it that we lack the inner attributes to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and take responsibility to just figure out how to be, have, and do whatever it is that we say we truly want? And some of us can even understand that sentiment. I know that sometimes I do, but what if that's a completely false narrative? Psychologists refer to that perspective as a fundamental attribution error, which is the assumption that when somebody says they want one thing, but their behavior doesn't match their verbal commitments, we have a tendency to assume that it's because that individual lacks character, strength, willpower. Insert whatever attribute you want to into that narrative. I mean, if somebody says they want weight loss, but what they do is Ben and Jerry's, I mean, what are we to assume? And, this happens to me. My friends in the fitness industry think that I have a bit of a relaxed attitude towards working out, but that's not true. I love to work out and I do it all the time. The only thing is, my favorite exercise happens to be chewing. But yet on the other hand, when these same critics, these same individuals that point out the inner attributes that people should possess, but somehow they don't, when they demonstrate a contradiction in their own lives, they attribute it not to any lack of an intrinsic character trait, but to external forces beyond their control. They'll point out the character traits that they believe you lack, but even though Jane prides herself on being responsible and punctual, when she rocks up late to an important meeting, a meeting in which everybody's sitting around waiting for her, she blames the traffic and not her lack of planning, even though she takes the 405 in Los Angeles. Traffic in Los Angeles. Oh, Jane, no one could have ever predicted that. Maybe 100 years ago, but in the past 20 years, it's kind of more common than taxes. So let's assume, I don't even think that's a correct statement, but anyway, let's assume there's nothing wrong with you or anybody else for that matter. I mean, there could be something wrong with a few of us. I don't know, but let's assume that the vast majority of people that are listening to this and that we know are not necessarily the root cause of the problem or the sole root cause of the problem. Let me just propose that one issue might be an overwhelming amount of information and that seemingly conflicting information that we're exposed to constantly. So Francis Bacon said that knowledge itself is power. Francis Bacon lived in an age where knowledge was privileged, limited, and didn't take much for a relatively long period of time. So today, we have access to more information than any other human being at any other point in history. And that knowledge changes constantly. The late social economist Neil Postman referred to the age we are living in now as a technopoly. And what he meant by that is there's more information than there is application. So it's not necessarily about knowing more. It's about knowing what you want and how to discern the right information and strategies to get it. What's even more debilitating than information overload is that when we feel as if we're drowning in a sea of information, and then we pick up one more book, watch one more video, read one more post, and the advice we're given seems to contradict the advice that the last guru gave us, it feels like we've been given stone shoes rather than a life's vest. So in this episode, we're going to look at some common misconceptions around behavior change that cause so many of us frustration, not to mention waste our time and our energy. And then we're going to explore simple yet proven strategies around effective behavior change. So if you've ever struggled with behavior change, or you're seeking to change some aspect of your life or help somebody else change some aspect of their life, yet you're slightly apprehensive based on your experience, based on a lack of confidence, or you simply don't know what to do, or they don't know what to do, this episode is going to be pretty valuable for you, because I'm going to share with you insights that are going to help you to eliminate the guesswork for behavior change so you can start seeing results almost immediately. If you work with people that are looking to change, you're going to have tools, resources, and strategies that you can convey to them that's going to help them see results almost immediately. And this is going to save you time, energy, and most importantly, frustration, while giving you the confidence and the power to make the changes that support what it is that you value most in your life and your work, which may annoy some members of your family and friends. So that's a fun component as well. So when you leave this episode, approach these insights and strategies with a spirit of play and curiosity. Rather than selecting one intimidatingly large outcome, think about one small digestible behavior that you'd like to change. And rather than telling yourself a story about what the outcome means, treat this as a fun experiment where you're curious about what it is that you can learn. Take just one behavior that's important to you, yet small enough to not be overly intimidating, and follow the steps that you're going to learn in this episode today. Then ask yourself, where did you perform particularly well? What does that success say about the attributes you actually possess? How can you leverage those attributes towards making even bigger changes in the future if you so decide? What was challenging? And what percentage of overall success would you give yourself? What was different on the days when you performed at your best versus the days that were particularly challenging? And finally, what would it take for you to perform at just a couple of percentage points higher next time? You'll start to see that you have the strengths, ability, and the processes to make you feel more confident about the changes that you've shied away from in the past. So the National Institutes of Health reports that out of anyone who sets a goal again for weight loss, 97% are either going to fail to lose the weight or keep it off for a span of 5 years. That's kind of discouraging to a lot of people. And, make things worse, a study conducted, at Scranton University a few years back revealed that out of everyone who sets a New Year's resolution on some aspect of health and fitness, only 8% manage to even keep it. Not to mention fail to reach it. Even more discouraging. And we've all seen this. New Year's is the time that we're all supposed to be at our most motivated and to set and achieve goals. New year, new me. You join a gym, and like on the 6th of January, you can't even get close to any equipment because there are so many people. They're nearly packed in there shoulder to shoulder. Yet you walk into the gym on the 26th of January and you can literally fire a cannonball through the main gym floor and you're not going to kill anyone. And this is despite the fact that we're all living well into, and some experts say well beyond the information age. Again, there's more information around how to do anything than there has ever been at any other time in history. And if you go to Amazon and you search under books with the keyword habit or behavior change, you're going to get over 20,000 results for either. So even though we have more access to more information than a Rhodes Scholar could have dreamed of having a century ago on any subject, my suspicion from literally the hundreds of thousands of coaches and trainers I've helped develop over the years and thousands of leaders and everyday people I've worked with is that the problem is not so much what we know, but it's the misconceptions around what we think we know. There are so many misconceptions and assumptions around behavior change that are not only ineffective, but in some cases, they're really harmful. So many years ago, I got a call from one of my mentors. When I first met him, I was full of passion and determination. I just didn't know for what or why. I was the human equivalent of an octopus on rollerblades. A lot of motion, but no direction. I was 18 years old, just moved out on my own. I was passionate about exercise, people, but I felt like I was an imposter. I have Tourette's, and according to the last doctor who evaluated me, I probably have an upwards of 10 major concussions that I've suffered by the time that I was in my teens. When I was 10 years old, I was put on what was, at that point, experimental medication. That medication, Haldol, is quite toxic to your brain, especially a young developing brain. I struggled cognitively for a large part of my childhood. As a result, when I was 18, I felt that I wasn't very smart, and I didn't really have the confidence to think that I could go out and master anything in a way that would allow me the level of competence to help others. When I met, let's call him Michael, I had just started working at his company a couple of months earlier, and he saw something in me that I didn't really see for myself at the time. Instantly, he had really big plans for my career in his organization. I wasn't excited about my future there as he was. I was quite reluctant, as a matter of fact, because I couldn't see myself going as far in the organization as he could. But as any great mentor or guide, he helped me go just as far as I could see. Because when I got there, what happened? Right, I was able to see a little bit further. He was a major positive influence in my life. So when he called me that day, I was excited to give him a piece of news. We had just closed a major contract with the largest health club chain on the East Coast, and I was moving back to New York City. I wanted to get together for lunch. It had been way too long since we'd seen each other. Michael said to me, I'd love to see you, Bobby. I miss you, pal. But I don't know how long I'm going to be around for. I didn't like the tone of his voice, to say the least. And, I said, half joking, in kind of a nervous quip, are you planning on moving as well? And he said, well, I did move, actually. And now he was nervously laughing. He said, Emma threw me out. I said, what? He said, I quit smoking. And I was confused. Michael, she threw you out of the house because you quit smoking. Okay, this was one of those WTF moments, which was not exactly what I said, as you can imagine. After a pause that felt like the better part of an hour, he said, Bob, I called you because I have a bit of bad news. I went to the doctor recently. He diagnosed me with emphysema. He told me that in no uncertain terms, if I didn't quit smoking, my life expectancy, well, it's not good, pal. And I paused for a bit, and I was trying to take this all in. I thought, should I say something? Of course I should say something. But what? What do you even say in this scenario? So I said the only thing I could think of. I'm so sorry to hear this. Like, all of it. It does sound like hearing about the emphysema scared you enough to finally quit smoking. And he started laughing. And he said, no. I was stressed out when I heard the news. And the first thing I did when I left his office was I lit up another cigarette. And I just responded with, okay. So what happened then? He said, I went home and I was a mess. And I told Emma, if you haven't guessed at this point, this is his wife. I told Emma what happened. And I wanted to know, how did she respond? And he said, well, Bob, she didn't say a word at first. Her face started to get red. Her eyes welled up, and then she stormed upstairs. And he goes on to tell me that he thought that she went up there because she was so distraught. And he starts to tell me, I felt horrible. I felt so guilty. I literally did not know what to do. And before I could go upstairs to be with her, my suitcase came flying over the banister and then my clothes. Oh. He went on to tell me that she came down the stairs and he said, oh, she was angry, really angry. She got right in my face and said, how many years, Mike? How many years have we been asking you to stop smoking? Have we been patient, supportive? Every week you announce that you're going to quit, and then the same day you start up smoking again. But we put up with it because we love you, and we didn't want to pressure you. We didn't want to make you feel bad. And then she screamed in his face, how am I going to raise 3 kids alone? If you decided that you're going to die, at least spare the kids having to watch their father die slowly and miserably. Get out. Don't come here. Don't come around here. Stay away from the kids. Even with the threat of death, the first thing he reached for was the cigarettes. But when his wife said, don't come around the kids, he thought, my kids, I can't lose my kids. And the way he explained it was that very moment as he walked out of the house, suitcase in hand, that he decided once and for all he was going to quit smoking. And don't misunderstand. Michael did have another cigarette and another. However, this time was different because what Michael discovered in the middle of this horrible situation was that your chances of successfully changing a behavior are directly related to the reasons why you want to change it. Many people struggle with behavior change because it's something they should do or something someone else wants them to do. Shoulds devolve into can'ts quite readily. When your why is strong enough, your resolve will be deep enough. What's the value that's supported by your change in behavior? When you make a change in your behavior that will tangibly change your future, what is it that moves you on a deeply emotional and meaningful level? For Michael, it was being able to see his kids. It was being able to play with them. It was being able to be a father to them, to raise them with his wife and watch them grow up into adults. All of which he did, by the way. Spoiler alert, because he did quit smoking. But on that day, he also discovered that the strategies he was using was based on misconceptions. They weren't necessarily true. It's not that he was hopeless or unmotivated or uncommitted. He had misconceptions about behavior change, as many of us do, that was holding him back. I mean, you can have all the willpower and mental toughness of a Spartan soldier. If you don't have a strong enough why, the right strategies, and appreciate the influence that your environment, that's right, your environment has over your behaviors, it's going to be an unnecessarily tough uphill battle. He also learned that change is not linear and neat. It's messy most of the time. But failure is not a person. It's a single isolated event. An event that we frame either in a way that helps us to go further and faster than we would have been able to go if it never occurred at all, or we frame it in a way that makes us internalize it and it destroys the possibility of us taking another critical step. Failure is a friend, not an adversary to behavior change. So these insights have made an enormous difference, not only in Michael's life, but in the life of countless people I know and worked with, and in my own life as well. But it's insights like this that allowed me to go from an 18-year-old trainer who wasn't even sure if he belonged working in the same place as quote-unquote normal people, to traveling the world, speaking, writing, consulting, and learning to learn, something that I thought was so far out of my reach at the time. So if you can identify what really matters and how changing a specific behavior will support that, if you could select a specific behavior and follow the processes laid out in this session, you're going to experience greater confidence and self-efficacy. And this can change the way you look at habit formation. It can change your life. For some of you, and for some of the people you work with, it can save a life, because any change must always be preceded by a behavior change. And I'm talking about this from a level of confidence that I have in you, because if the Tourette's guy with brain damage can learn this stuff, so can you. So although there are many misconceptions around human behavior, I want to talk about 6 fallacies around human behavior that can hurt us. And they're so limiting to our capacity for successful transformation because they're rooted in partial truths. They're not totally incorrect. And what I want to talk about is, number 1, motivation is what drives habit formation. 2, more education is needed around the benefits of habit formation. 3, I love this one. You've heard this. 21 days to form a habit. 4, habit formation requires discipline. And 5, better goal setting and greater determination is really what makes the difference in change, versus changing your environment can change your life. And finally, immersive lifestyle change versus small incremental change. So let's start with motivation drives habit formation. First of all, when we talk about motivation, we hear this all the time. Like, what is motivation? Well, I would do that, but I have no motivation. I would start this, but I have no motivation, or I'm waiting to be motivated. I mean, this is the reason why so many people can't get themselves off the couch and into action. They have an enormous but. Not anatomically speaking, but metaphorically. When we talk about motivation, its simplistic definition is a reason for doing something or behaving in some way. And if we go by that definition, then yes, motivation is crucial to getting started anyway. If you don't have a reason for doing something, not doing it kind of makes sense. But that's not what we mean most of the time. Most of the time, we look at motivation as this emotional lightning bolt that hits us and fills us with the energy and resolve to pursue our aspirations with great enthusiasm. It's that magic feeling that gets us into action. And if we wait on a feeling, we're going to be waiting a long time, because the way we eat, the way we move, the way we interact with one another, the way we sleep in terms of quantity and quality, the way that we look at stress, what we believe about stress, and how we manage stress, all of this has a significant impact on how we feel moment to moment. And traffic kills our motivation. Or I don't know, maybe that's just me. So in some parts of the world, anyway, don't even get me started on public transportation. So what I was saying is that my point is motivation fluctuates for several reasons, and it's at best unpredictable. So it's not a very good strategy to try and leverage with any level of consistency. Let's take a look at motivation from a neurobiological perspective, specifically the dopaminergic pathways. And when people think about dopamine, they think about reward. That's the pleasure chemical, right? What happens in Vegas, well, stays on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And I don't know, probably TikTok now. That's what all the crazy kids are doing, I've heard. So if you look at the function of dopamine and the reward pathways of the brain, it's more about anticipation of reward and the engagement of reward-seeking behaviors. Dopamine works with a component of the reward pathway, the ventral striatum, on the anticipation of reward and the orbital frontal cortex and portions of your prefrontal cortex to facilitate the engagement of reward-seeking behavior. So I was raised in the northeast part of the United States, Brooklyn specifically. So back when I was growing up, you had people in your neighborhood who understood what I'm about to communicate to you. And we knew all about goal-seeking behaviors intuitively. And yes, we used it manipulatively. You see, we had this cultural ritual back in Brooklyn called Entenmann's. And Entenmann's were these pre-made cakes that you can buy in the supermarket that reportedly could outlast the apocalypse. And they were pretty good. Not pretty good for you. They were probably poison. But they tasted pretty good. Now, if you wanted people to come visit you, you always had to have one of these Entenmann's cakes or pies on hand. And once the word got out, people would come and stop by, sometimes fairly often, sometimes so often that your plan would backfire. And this was a duplicitous form of social bribery, but it worked. Because if you were a parent and you wanted your kids' friends to be in your kitchen rather than out in the streets up to no good, you'd keep Entenmann's on hand. and they would float into your house at some point. So the anticipation of reward was enough for people to change their plans and take action to get from where they were to your house. Now, often motivation works the opposite of the way we think it does. Rather than once I feel motivated, I'm going to take action. Taking action often generates a feeling of motivation. Another psychological principle that works in your favor when you have a bias for action is cognitive dissonance. It's psychologically distressing to hold contradictory perspectives in your mind and still function. So let's say Lisa, and if your name is Lisa as you're listening to this, understand I'm talking about a different Lisa. But anyway, Lisa considers herself to be health conscious, but she smokes. Her friends and family keep admonishing her to stop, but she keeps seeing ad campaigns on the danger of cigarettes to her health. So this information is a contradiction to her beliefs about herself. Based on cognitive dissonance, she's either going to have to quit smoking or justify the contradiction by dismissing the causal links between smoking and the health risks it presents. We've all known people who do the latter. She might rationalize that her Aunt Betty smoked 2 packs a day and lived well into her 90s. It's not crossing into traffic when the don't walk signal is on. It's basically the fear of getting hit by a bus that's the real danger. And then there's self-efficacy. The inward belief in our ability to initiate and then perpetuate behaviors that support our desired outcomes. Each time we engage in a behavior that's aligned with the outcomes that we say is important to us, we improve the reputation we have with ourselves. We build a body of evidence, one behavior at a time, that kind of elevates our confidence and our ability to follow through and therefore succeed. So let's take a look at a powerful case study. Back in the 1970s, Dr. Mimi Silbert looked at career criminals who spent their lives in and out of the prison system. These individuals were labeled as psychopaths who were beyond rehabilitation. Now, Dr. Mimi Silbert asked herself the question, is this true? And after studying an exhaustive number of cases and interviewing an exhaustive amount of criminals, she determined that there were 2 core beliefs that these individuals identified with the most. The first one was, look out for number 1. The second was don't ever rat. Ever. So she started a program in San Francisco called Delancey Street. Now, the government obviously refused to fund the program, but what they did do was agree that in certain cases when a repeat offender was in front of the judge, once again, they would be given a choice between going back to prison or going into the Delancey Street program, depending on the type of crime that they committed. So given that these people were facing quite a lot of time behind bars, there was a lot of incentive to give the program a go. I mean, that is, if you got in trouble in the program, however, or if you violated any of the rules, you went back to prison immediately. And once you got inside the program, you learned that there were 2 chief rules. First, if you were in the program for just a week, someone who came into the program yesterday would be put with you. None of the supervisors would ever ask you again how you were doing. They would ask, how's your crew? You were completely responsible for the individuals that were assigned to you. You would be evaluated by their success and their failures, not your own. So much for looking out for number 1, right? Second, I think you see where I'm going with this. If you witnessed anyone in the program breaking any of the rules, no matter how minor, you had to report them. If they were caught and a supervisor found out that you knew about it, you would be the one that was punished, and that often meant you were kicked out of the program and you were sent back to prison. So much for never rat under any circumstances. I mean, there was more to the strategy at Delancey Street. However, these 2 rules were a critical part of its success. The people in the program had to either view themselves as rats and weak people who couldn't look out for number 1, or they had to rationalize that those beliefs that they had been living by were fundamentally flawed. I mean, after all, it was in part those beliefs and attitudes that put them in a place they really didn't want to be. They had to reason that maybe looking out for others, looking out for your crew was a better way. And and man, was it. Many of the individuals that were labeled quote unquote beyond rehabilitation became hosts, servers, and managers at some of San Francisco's finest restaurants and hotels. They became caring, conscientious, contributing members of society. It wasn't that they changed their beliefs and attitudes. It wasn't motivation that got them to change. They changed their behaviors, which reframed their beliefs and attitudes, motivating them to become a different type of person. So here's an application for what we just talked about. Write down 1 or 2 limiting beliefs that you have about behavior change or your ability to effectively change in the areas of your life that are most important to you. If you're not sure, these are things that you say to yourself when you start and stop again and again. When you find yourself getting ready to get ready, or when you outright give up on a commitment that you said was important to you. What does that voice in your head say to you in those situations? That's it. That's the limiting belief. Next, what are 1 to 2 beliefs that if you had them instead would most support you in being the person who did the things they needed to do in order to be what you wanted to be? Write them down as replacements for your limiting belief. Now, here's the really important part. If you fully possess those 1 to 2 empowering beliefs, in what 1 or 2 ways would you behave differently? We're not looking for conceptual ambiguities, but behavioral specifics. For example, if one of your limiting beliefs is, I'm so lazy I never follow through, and the new empowering belief that you want to adapt is, even though at times I don't feel like it, I always keep my word with myself and others. If we were detectives looking for evidence to support that an individual was truly in possession of that belief, what would we need to observe? What would be the evidence? We wouldn't be able to observe motivation. We wouldn't be able to observe commitment or the belief itself, right? Often we get so caught up in this stuff. If you have kids or if you know somebody with kids, I think that covers just about everybody. One of your kids is at a game. Let's say it's a basketball game. What advice are they often given? You gotta believe in yourself. You need to really want it. Go out there and play hard. Now, what's the problem with this? Besides the fact that the other team is probably thinking the same thing, the problem is that while belief, desire, and hard work all support winning games, no argument there, what actually wins games? And the answer is scoring points, in this case, baskets. Never are you going to hear the announcer say, the away team scored 67 points, home team 53. However, upon review of the instant replay, the faces on the home team showed greater intensity of belief and commitment. The game goes to the home team, right? So if you possess the belief that you always keep your word, and I were to ask you, well, what's the evidence of that behavior? You wouldn't say, well, I'm reliable or I'm committed. Rather, you would say, I get out of bed at 5 a.m. and I go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On the rare occasion when I miss, I make it up on the weekend. That's specific. That's behavioral. So what is one behavior that you're going to do daily as evidence of your new belief? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you that you're going to follow through? And if you're being completely honest with yourself and you get anything less than an 8, reduce the size of the behavior until it's ridiculous and it's an absolute 8. If you say that you're going to read trade journals for 1 hour a day, but your confidence in your ability to follow through on that consistently is at a level 5, maybe revise the commitment to 30 minutes. If it's still not an 8, 20 minutes, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter, because once you start doing it consistently, your level of motivation is going to change. Your self-concept will expand, and you'll have the evidence to support a higher level of confidence in the future. You can always, at that point, expand your commitments. As a matter of fact, according to the research by James Petraska, you're twice as likely to do so. So many of us use perfection to disguise a lack of confidence. We set a behavioral goal that's bigger than our reality. And we do that because we think that more is better, or we're applying someone else's standards to our strategy. And this puts us in a perpetual cycle of getting ready to get ready. Let me read one more book. Okay, I'm going to go to one more seminar. I'm going to learn more, all of which is recommended and highly effective. Until learning more is not done in conjunction with, but it takes the place of action. So this is also known as knowledge induction, which means if people only knew more about the consequences of their action, they would change. By itself, education does not equal transformation. Education is not enough. We have to replace unwanted behaviors with new constructive behaviors and address the triggers of those behaviors. Dr. Gemma Calvert conducted an interesting study at Warwick University involving 32 moderate to heavy smokers. She had them fill out a questionnaire assessing the effectiveness of anti-smoking campaigns. First, they viewed various warning labels on packs of cigarettes. In the United States, warning labels are small and they're on the side of the package in fine print. In the European Union, in the United Kingdom, they have these big signs dominating the pack that read things like, quote, "smoking kills," unquote. But in places like Canada and Australia, they have graphic images of a coffin or a person with their face rotting off because of oral cancer. I mean, there's no room to look at those pictures and misinterpret it. Nobody looks at a pack of cigarettes with a skeleton on the front smoking a cigarette and thinks, wait, hold on, are they saying that smoking is going to make me thinner? Anyway, let's get back to the study. All of the 32 participants rated the warning labels as being highly effective. They reported that when they looked at those warnings, it induced fear. Or in some cases, people felt angry with themselves because of what they were doing to themselves and their family. Remember Michael? Then they were put into an MRI, which stands for magnetic resonance imaging machine, and shown the same images. Now, if they were correct that the ads were effective and that they were angry, fearful, motivated to quit, the amygdala would have had something to say about it. In the limbic system, the amygdala is critical in processing emotions like fear and anger. Yet, to the researcher's surprise, the amygdala had relatively little to say about the situation. But here's what was more surprising. The part of the brain that was particularly active was the ventral striatum, the part of the reward pathway involved in anticipation of reward. Yep. So even though these people thought that the ads were effective, their brains had kind of a different story to tell. Seeing the images made them crave a cigarette. Again, for education to be effective, it must at some point require a behavior change. We have to replace unwanted behaviors with new constructive behaviors and address the triggers of those behaviors. Okay, so how do I apply this? Not all of you might smoke, and great if you don't. So let's just identify one habit that you'd like to replace. For many people, replacing a habit can be more effective than habit cessation. And one reason for this is cognitive load. It's simply easier to initiate a new behavior than trying not to do something, like trying not to think about a flying pink elephant with blue polka dots. Go ahead. Tell yourself to stop thinking about that flying pink blue polka-dotted elephant. Not easy, is it? As a matter of fact, the more you try to not think about it, the more vividly you create it. Now, focus your mind on the image of your front door. What color and shade is it? Pause. Really envision the image of the front door to your apartment or your house. What happened to the elephant? So when you think about that one behavior that's in alignment with your new empowering belief, focus on what you're going to do rather than what you're not going to do. Instead of, I'm not going to eat unhealthy foods every day. Instead, try every meal I have this week. I will add plants, vegetables to it so I can get more of the nutrients I need. So this leads us into our third misconception, and that is, once you have a clear goal in mind, determination is more important than environment. Determination matters, but it's not more important than environment. Our behaviors are triggered as well as conditioned by cues in our environment. If we don't find new triggers to support the new habits we want to create, those potentiated neural pathways are going to be activated by the old cues that trigger unwanted behaviors. So I have a friend of mine who, out of the thousands of fitness managers I have worked with over the years, was arguably one of the best. Her teams completely transformed every department that she ran. She had the highest percentage of revenue over target, the highest client satisfaction ratings, the highest employee retention. She was an incredible leader, and it was likely because of her skill in selecting the right team members and her investment in their success and development. But she was always embarrassed that she secretly smoked. And it turns out that there are a few smokers in the fitness industry. She would spray perfume to go to work and try to cover up the smell of the cigarette smoke. She struggled to quit. And this is one of the most determined, tenacious people I know. Then she moved to a new city for a new job, and she didn't know anyone. And the loneliness only increased how much she smoked until she met a friend of hers that was on a local track and field team. And her friend invited her to join. She loved the team as well as the idea of doing track. And the practices were brutally hard at first. And she was the worst on the team. However, she really wanted it. With less effort than she had previously exerted, she was able to quit smoking within her first month on the team. Within 6 months, she was one of the top runners. And this happened for two reasons. One, she'd always considered herself a smoker. It was part of her identity. She wasn't someone who smoked. She was a smoker. It's a subtle yet significant distinction. When her identity started to shift from smoker to track athlete, easy for me to say, those two frames didn't really go together. And because they didn't coincide, they started to collide. Track athletes typically do not smoke. It wasn't any longer a part of her identity. She had a new, more compelling identity. It's not just what you want to do, but who you most want to be. Second, when she started doing track, her physical and social environment completely changed. This not only removed the old triggers from her environment, but it also created new ones that supported a different behavior pattern. If you wanted to stop drinking for a month, you can have all the willpower and determination in the world, but if you meet up with your friends at a local bar after work, keeping that commitment to yourself is going to be a lot harder than if you met someone at a coffee shop. If you want to change behavior, you need to change your environment. So let's say you have a new commitment in line with your new empowering belief, and that is, I'm going to exercise for 1 hour every day after work. But when you get home, the sofa and the TV trigger the old patterns of behavior of collapsing on the couch to decompress. Sound familiar? And, that creates another cue. And the other cue that you would need to create could be that you cover up your TV, and in front of the TV, you lay a yoga mat right out in the middle of your living room. Our brains are wired for habit formation. And the issue is, are the habits that we develop serving us or working against who we want to be? what it is we want to have, and what it is we want to do. Are they formed by design or are they formed by default? When we're reacting to how the various triggers in our environment have conditioned us, we give ourselves an advantage by structuring our environmental triggers around the behaviors that support our highest outcomes. If we stick with it long enough, those responses to our triggers become constructively conditioned habits. But how long is long enough? So let's talk about 21 days to form a habit. This is probably one of the most common misconceptions, and this misconception has frustrated the efforts of so many people, I don't know, maybe yourself included, because it creates unrealistic expectations around habit change. So to date, there's been no scientific evidence to back up this widespread assumption. The literature points to the fact that it takes 60 days or more to create a habit, with variables such as the type of motivation you're looking to create, how important the habit is, relevance, consistency, and frequency. All of these are factors. And some research might say it takes as little as 18 days. Some research says, well, it takes as much as 266 days. So the information is all over the shop. So where did the myth originally come from? And it originally comes from Dr. Maxwell Maltz's book, Psychocybernetics. Now, he never said it takes 21 days to form a habit. He was talking about a specific instance where it took a patient about 21 days to get used to the shift in her post-op experience of herself. Somehow that got turned into it takes 21 days to form a habit. So people who expect to change within just 21 days are setting themselves up for frustration and disappointment. The point is, if you treat habit creation as fun experiments with an attitude of curiosity, patience, and self-compassion, you're going to be giving yourself an enormous advantage over those who don't. When we think about quote unquote doing the work of habit formation, we don't often hear advice around words like fun, curiosity, patience, and self-compassion. More often, we hear words like grit, perseverance, and discipline. So let's get to our fifth misconception. It requires discipline to initiate many behaviors, but not necessarily to perpetuate them. Many of our quote-unquote chosen behaviors that we engage in every day are more the result of our conditioning than what we're consciously choosing. So if we relied on discipline for many of the things that we had to do every day, we would deplete our cognitive resources. The more you engage in a specific behavior, the less your prefrontal cortex, the deciding region of your brain, is involved. And this is beyond its initiation anyway. So it doesn't take discipline to brush your teeth, right? Like, how many of you have ever driven to the office on a Saturday, even though it's your day off? Again, yeah, that never happened to me. So when you're in the process of creating a new habit and something goes wrong, instead of telling yourself how undisciplined you are, which is the old belief, try a question instead. Try asking, what can I learn from this? Or what was different about this, as opposed to a time when I successfully executed my new behavior? See, the key is mindfulness, which means paying attention to what is occurring when it's occurring and what these occurrences are teaching you. Where attention goes, energy flows. You only have so much energy, so spend it wisely. And this makes the last misconception rather important, and that is immersive versus incremental change. There's a misconception that effective transformation requires making many adjustments at once. You want to lose 5 kilos, so you join a gym. And on your first orientation with the trainer, they're talking about exercise, which, to be fair, is not all that weird considering you're in the gym. But then they start to talk about changing your eating habits. That's right. They take away your cake and then your nightly glass of wine. Wait a minute. Hold on. So you're not going to lose weight if you're not sleeping well. So there goes Netflix. And we also need to focus on stress management, supplementation, support, and environment is important. So you're going to have to go out and get a whole new social circle. And at the end of the day, They're not wrong. In fact, there's evidence to support that this kind of approach does work in some cases because you're changing so many things that it just might shorten the amount of time that it takes you to see results, which is kind of inspiring. So what's the problem with this approach? First, that trainer sucks. I hate her. Next is temporal discounting. We as human beings have the tendency to perceive the desired outcome in the future as being less valuable than one in the present. The more things that we need to sacrifice in the very, very beginning for an outcome that's off in the future, the more we're going to disproportionately value these things over that future outcome. So even though an immersive approach might motivate me in the very beginning, it can also increase recidivism. So I'm more likely to quit when the process gets challenging. And the process always gets challenging. Chunking is another problem here. If we're tackling everything all at once, it's not unlikely that we'll perceive all of the variables as one cohesive weight loss strategy. So, if we fall short in one area, let's say we didn't get enough sleep one night, we can easily misinterpret that as a general failure, which negatively affects our self-efficacy, our belief in our ability to continually engage in the actions that support the results we want the most. On the other hand, if you're seeing results, you have no way of knowing which one of your efforts are working and why. It's analogous to going to the doctor. You don't feel well. After an examination, the doctor makes a diagnosis and prescribes medication. However, instead of one medication, the doctor prescribes 4 possible medications that could address the problem. Wow, that's so worrisome for so many reasons. But back to the point, if you start to feel better, you have no idea which one of those medications worked. So if these misconceptions limit our abilities to successfully change our behavior, what helps us? You start with one thing. Literally identify one behavior that you wish to change. It doesn't have to be something big, just something that's aligned with your values and the outcomes that you most want to produce. One thing doesn't sound like much. It may even sound inconsequential, yet one small, seemingly inconsequential action can compound into transformative ways of acting and being. Thomas Edison said that if we did all the things that we're capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. And I think even Edison would agree that capacity grows through endeavor. Or stealing the work of Joseph Swan and Nikola Tesla. That grows over time as well. Anyway, so astounding outcomes often come from humble origins. Charles Duhigg, in his book, The Power of Habits, identified something that he calls keystone habits, which he identified as, quote, small changes in habits that people introduce to their routines that unintentionally carry over into other aspects of their lives, unquote. So my friend, the fitness manager, never set out to quit smoking. She simply joined the track team. In a relatively short period of time, however, she realized that smoking was interfering with running. That one decision to join track, supported by the habit of regularly attending practice, led to her smoking cessation. But that's not all that happened. After she started to perform better, she changed her dietary habits, and it would help her even further. And it did. What would happen if she changed her sleep patterns? Well, she felt even better. Today, she doesn't smoke, she doesn't drink, she avoids sugar and processed foods and doesn't stay up late at night watching movies like she used to. And it all started with one habit. What type of life experience do you think she gets to have now as a result of that one keystone habit? You're probably thinking, well, she's boring, miserable, and I would never invite her to a dinner party. And fair point, but she's actually a lot of fun because she not only feels more energized than she ever remembers feeling, her cognition is sharper than when she was half her age. She's expanded her skills and done more things in her career than she ever would have had the energy or confidence to do a decade ago, because small changes lead to big results. So here's an application. If you're going to address just one behavior at a time, When you experience a positive result, you know what actions you're taking and what are working. When you don't get the result you want, it's easier to identify why. This decreases overwhelm. It increases your ability to adapt your strategy, and it supports self-confidence and self-efficacy. When it comes to change, our instinct is to go big. But if you want to increase your chances of success, the secret is sometimes in thinking small. One small habit, which facilitates another, then another, all compounding on top of each other like any good investment, yields exponential returns. Never underestimate the power of subtle yet consistent change. As Warren Buffett once said, the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. These are the insights that took me from a neurodiverse kid with brain damage who struggled in many aspects of schooling to someone who developed the habits that allowed me to learn and communicate in a way that expanded my reality, turning the things that caused me frustration into a source of exhilaration. It allowed me to do what I most wanted to do, which is to be here with you doing what I'm now doing. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at theselfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.